The Galactic Senate was never one to be startled easily. The Senate had seen wars that spanned light years, empires that rose and fell in the blink of an eye, and civilizations that crushed their enemies with technological marvels. But there was something about the report they had just received that had everyone in the room leaning forward with a mix of disbelief and intrigue. Earth's civilian death tolls are higher than their elite forces combined. The statement echoed through the Senate chamber, the words almost too absurd to believe. A collective murmur ran through the room, and representatives from dozens of alien races exchanged puzzled glances. Earth, a young, chaotic world by galactic standards, had always been seen as a quaint curiosity, a backwater planet where primitive humans had barely scratched the surface of a cosmos. Yet here they were, inexplicably outpacing some of the most battle-hardened warriors in the galaxy in the brutal game of war. Is this accurate? The question came from Senator Valnax, a seasoned leader from the Iric Dominion, known for his sharp strategic mind and a deep disdain for human recklessness. Yes, Senator, responded Commander Oren, a high-ranking officer in the Galactic Intelligence Bureau. The numbers are indisputable. Earth's civilian casualties in recent conflicts, most notably during the war with the Rakith Collective, are staggering. And more troubling, their civilians are the ones causing the highest body counts, not their trained soldiers. There was a silence in the room as the gravity of the statement sank in. How could a species so young, so unrefined, have developed a force so deadly? And what was it about Earth that had made their civilians, those who weren't even trained for battle, more lethal than the warriors of ancient and powerful empires? Senator Valnax shifted in his seat, his long, reptilian fingers tapping the edge of the polished stone desk in front of him. We need answers. Send a team. I want the truth about Earth's military capabilities. And I want it now. Oren nodded grimly. A team will be assembled, Senator. But I must warn you, the data we've already uncovered points to something unsettling. Earth's civilian warriors are not what we expect from a species that has only recently joined the galactic stage. The room buzzed with speculation. Some members whispered in hushed tones, while others stared at their screens, scanning reports from Earth's recent military engagements. But despite their curiosity, they couldn't shake the growing unease. There was a force on Earth, an untapped potential, that they didn't yet understand, and that ignorance had made them all vulnerable. One of the younger senators, a sharp-eyed member of the Drather Coalition, leaned forward, her voice cutting through the murmurs. What is it about their civilians? Do they have some sort of advanced weaponry? Is it some form of genetic enhancement? Commander Oren paused, and his gaze hardened. Not exactly. There's no sign of advanced tech. No enhancements. But there's something else, something deeper. It's their mindset. Earth civilians don't fight because they have to. They fight because they survive. And survival, in the most hostile environments imaginable, has become their way of life. Survival. Valnax raised an eyebrow. How do you mean? Earth's environment is what they call a death world. From the moment they're born, humans are exposed to dangers, predators, natural disasters, wars, and famine. It's a world where only the strong thrive and the weak perish. Their civilization is built on the ability to adapt, to fight for every inch of ground. It's not just in their soldiers, it's in every human. The room grew quiet as the full implications of Oren's words settled in. Humans didn't need advanced technology or genetic engineering to be dangerous. They had something far more primal, the ability to endure, to fight, and to kill. Valnax's lips curled into a thin, calculating smile. So what you're telling me is that Earth's civilians are trained, by their very environment, to be killers? And that's what makes them so lethal. Exactly, Oren replied, his voice grave. They don't need elite forces. Their entire species is built for survival. And when they fight like it's their only purpose. The Senate chamber fell into a tense silence. Some members exchanged nervous glances, while others leaned back in their seats, pondering the true implications of what they had just learned. Earth, once considered a mere curiosity, was rapidly becoming a source of deep concern for the galaxy's most powerful races. As Valnax looked around the room, he could feel the shift in the air. The galaxy's perception of Earth was about to change forever. No longer would they be dismissed as a primitive species. No, the Senate had just uncovered the most dangerous truth about humanity, something that would haunt the galaxy for years to come. "Prepare the team," Valnax ordered, his voice steady. "We will learn everything there is to know about Earth, and then we will decide what to do with them." The Senate's investigation had only just begun, but Commander Oren already felt the weight of the task before him. There was something profoundly unsettling about the report. The thought that Earth's civilians could outfight seasoned alien warriors, something they had dismissed as mere folklore or exaggeration, was a puzzle that refused to be solved. But as his team sifted through the records, it became clear that there was more to this than just strange coincidences. Earth's civilian death tolls weren't an anomaly. They were part of a disturbing pattern. "You're not going to believe this." The voice of Lieutenant Zora, one of the Bureau's most promising analysts, came through the comms, cutting through the heavy silence in the briefing room. Oren didn't need to ask for specifics. He could tell from her tone that she had uncovered something big. Zora's voice crackled back to life. "We found something. It's not just the wars or the battles. They've been training civilians for combat since they were children." Oren's pulse quickened. The idea that Earth's civilian population could be trained for warfare didn't fit with anything the galaxy knew. While some species had militarized cultures, Earth's approach was unique. Humans fought like wild animals in the most hostile environments, yes, but the idea of their society systematically preparing its citizens for combat was something else entirely. "What exactly are we looking at?" Oren asked, leaning forward, his mind racing with possibilities. Zora hesitated for a moment before replying. "It's a program. Something called the Survival Simulation Initiative. It's not well known even on Earth, but it's been operating for centuries. And it's not just a few isolated incidents. It's nationwide. Every child participates, every adult, regardless of background, undergoes some form of it. Civilians have been indoctrinated into a life where danger is constant and death is always lurking." Oren's fingers drummed on the surface of the desk. The implications were staggering. "Explain." Zora's voice was tight with urgency. "It's not military training per se. It's much more insidious. They immerse civilians in simulations designed to prepare them for real-world survival situations, ranging from armed conflict to natural disasters to psychological warfare. It's a type of environment designed to develop instinctual responses, where failure means death. Over time, these simulations become reality. The boundaries between training and actual combat blur." Oren sat back, processing the information. This wasn't just a military training initiative. This was survival on an extreme scale. And the results, though frightening, were undeniable. Humans were not just trained to be soldiers. They were raised to fight, to kill, and to survive no matter the cost. "Is this why their civilian kill counts are so high?" Oren asked, more to himself than to Zora. "Yes. And no. *** came a reply. "The real answer lies in the way Earth's culture has evolved. The planet has always been a death world. Hostile ecosystems, dangerous creatures, unpredictable climates, constant wars. But instead of dying off, Earth adapted. It created a society where survival is the only goal. These simulations, they become second nature to them." Oren's mind flashed to the reports of Earth's civilians in recent skirmishes, how they fought with a terrifying ferocity, their tactics unpredictable and brutal. But the most disturbing part was how these civilians, often with no formal military training, had wiped out entire enemy units. Some had even taken down elite forces in combat, without so much as a second thought. "Where do these simulations come from?" Oren pressed. "Who designed them?" Zora didn't have an immediate answer. The program's origins are as old as their history of warfare. It's a complex web, but the first records show it dating back over 500 years. It's not just a governmental program. It's deeply embedded in their culture. The public accepts it. They see it as a necessary part of life. There's even talk of it being ingrained into their educational system. A disturbing thought crossed Oren's mind. Earth's civilians weren't just dangerous in the sense of military might. They were dangerous because they viewed violence and survival as integral parts of their existence. He closed his eyes for a moment, picturing the people of Earth, ordinary men and women, living in a world constantly on the edge of chaos. They weren't trained in the traditional sense. They were conditioned, hardened by a lifetime of simulated violence and real-world conflict. And as terrifying as it was, it worked. "Keep digging," Oren ordered, his voice low but resolute. "I want every last detail about these simulations, and I want to know how they've evolved over time." As the briefing ended, Oren couldn't shake the feeling that they had only uncovered the surface of something much darker. Earth's civilian warriors weren't a result of isolated incidents. They were the product of a world designed to breed killers. And the galaxy, in all its advanced wisdom, had completely overlooked it. There was a chilling thought that refused to leave his mind. What would happen if Earth's civilians were given the resources and training that the galaxy's elite forces had? It was a question that would haunt the Senate for the rest of their investigation. The moment Commander Oren saw the footage, he knew they had stumbled onto something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. A civilian, barely more than a teenager, stood alone against an entire battalion of Rakith shock troops. She was armed with nothing more than a standard-issue rifle, barely enough to pierce the armor of an elite soldier. Yet in less than 5 minutes, she had wiped out half their numbers, taking down warriors known for their brutal combat training and resilience. A human, a civilian, ***. Oren watched the footage again, more carefully this time. The teenager wasn't just fighting. She was anticipating every move, reading her enemy's reactions with a precision that didn't belong to a person without formal training. She fought like a hunter, not a soldier. It was instinct, pure, unrefined, terrifying instinct. "That's impossible," murmured Lieutenant Zora, her voice trailing off in disbelief. How could she? Oren leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. The reports they had been studying now made an unsettling kind of sense. Earth's civilians were not just trained by their environment. They had been shaped by it. They had grown up in a death world, a planet constantly at war with itself, where survival was not a choice but a necessity. "What we're seeing here," Oren said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of his realization, "isn't just skill. It's a mindset. They aren't fighting because they have to. They fight because they're wired to." The concept of a death worlder was something few in the galaxy had truly understood. To survive on Earth was to live under constant threat, surrounded by dangers that would have obliterated most species. Whether it was predators, environmental hazards, or the near-constant wars between rival factions, Earth's inhabitants had been molded by a harsh reality that no other world could truly comprehend. "They're not just soldiers," Oren continued, his voice growing more intense. "They are living, breathing weapons. Every human on that planet is born into a fight for survival." Zora was silent, staring at the screen, as the teenager in the footage methodically took down another 2 Rakith soldiers, using their own weapons against them. It wasn't strategy. It was something deeper, something primal. It was the instinct to kill, to fight, to survive at any cost. And it was universal among humanity. We've seen the result of their civilian training. But this, Oren paused, shaking his head. This is something else. This isn't about formal tactics. It's a kind of brutality and cunning that can't be taught. Zora turned to him, her face pale. "But if this is how they fight, if this is the mindset they've developed over generations..." Oren didn't finish her sentence. He didn't need to. If Earth's civilians, untrained in the ways of traditional warfare, could fight like this, what did that say about the potential of their military forces? What did that say about Earth itself, a planet considered insignificant by the rest of the galaxy? A realization hit him with the force of a lightning bolt. The galaxy had made a grave mistake. The Rakith Collective, an empire feared throughout the galaxy for their brutal, calculated strategies, had underestimated humanity. They had believed that Earth's raw, unpolished forces could be easily crushed, just like any other primitive species. But what they hadn't accounted for was the essence of Earth's strength, the primal survival instinct that ran through every human, civilian or soldier. Oren leaned forward, pressing a button to pull up another report. This one was a historical analysis of Earth's past conflicts, real wars fought by humans, not just simulations or skirmishes. He scanned the data quickly, his mind racing. It's not just survival, he muttered under his breath. It's adaptation. Every conflict Earth had fought in, every crisis they had overcome, had been a lesson in survival. Humanity had faced extinction countless times, whether through war, disease, or natural disasters. But each time, they adapted. They learned. They evolved. What the galaxy viewed as a weakness, Earth had turned into its greatest strength. Oren looked up from the screen, his eyes hardening. This is why their civilians have higher kill counts than their elite forces. They don't just fight, they fight to win. At any cost. Zora nodded slowly, as if absorbing the full weight of what they were discovering. And if we thought they were just a nuisance before, we're terribly mistaken. Earth doesn't just survive. They thrive in chaos. For the first time in a long while, Commander Oren felt the full weight of the Senate's decision on his shoulders. He had been tasked with uncovering the truth about Earth, but what they had found was far more than they'd expected. Humanity wasn't just another species in the galaxy. It was a force, a wild, unpredictable, and potentially unstoppable power. And that made them a far greater threat than any of them could have ever imagined. We need to understand this fully, Oren said, a new urgency in his voice. Every scrap of data, every document. We need to know how far this goes. Because if the Senate underestimated Earth's civilians before, it was clear now. They wouldn't make that mistake again. The reports were clear. The Senate's investigation into Earth's military culture had uncovered something unsettling, something that no one in the galaxy had truly anticipated. A human civilian standing alone had survived an assault by one of the deadliest alien species in the galaxy. No special armor, no advanced weaponry, just sheer, unrelenting will to survive. And that wasn't an isolated incident. Commander Oren had seen the footage of that lone survivor. He had watched in disbelief as a group of heavily armed alien soldiers had attempted to overwhelm a single human in a destroyed city. They had underestimated her completely. They thought her just another weak, untrained civilian. But in the end, it was the soldiers who had fallen, slaughtered by an individual who had been raised in a world where death was as much a part of life as breathing. For the first time, Oren understood the true nature of Earth's civilian force. They were born warriors. He sat in the briefing room, surrounded by his team, still processing the weight of what he had learned. The historical data didn't just back up the claim, it amplified it. Earth's entire culture from its earliest days had been shaped by constant conflict, by the survival of the fittest. This wasn't just a matter of training or skill. It was the very essence of humanity. What we're seeing is a civilization that's been forged in fire, Oren said, his voice low but sharp. Earth isn't like any other planet we've encountered. Their civilians don't just live, they fight. From the moment they're born, they're immersed in environments designed to test their limits. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. His team exchanged uneasy glances. There was no denying the truth. The statistics were irrefutable. Earth's civilian population had faced countless threats over the centuries, diseases, natural disasters, wars. But instead of being wiped out, they had adapted. And they had become stronger. Lieutenant Zora's voice cut through the silence. So, this is what we're dealing with. It's not just isolated incidents of a few civilians outperforming soldiers. It's all of them. Every human on that planet has been conditioned to survive. They're warriors in the purest sense. Oren nodded. Exactly. The concept of military elite means nothing to Earth. There are no special forces. There are only forces. Every human is a potential combatant, and that's what makes them so dangerous. The data they had gathered made it clear. Earth's history was a history of war. But it wasn't just the wars between nations that had shaped the human psyche. It was the environment itself. Earth's natural world had always been a place of violent struggle, a place where life fought against death with every breath. Humans, unlike most species, had learned not only to survive, but to dominate. They had learned to fight in the harshest conditions, to adapt to constant danger. From the vast jungles to the frozen tundras, from the raging oceans to the scorching deserts, Earth had given birth to a civilization that knew how to endure. And that endurance was not limited to their military forces. Every civilian, from the moment they were born, was taught to fight, to survive. This isn't just a military strategy, Zora said, her eyes wide with a growing understanding of what they were seeing. This is an entire culture, a people who have lived with violence and danger for so long that it's a part of their DNA. They don't need training. They need nothing more than their instinct. Oren glanced at the reports again. Each battle, each skirmish, reinforced the same point. Earth's civilians didn't need to be special forces. They had no need for elite units. The entire population was elite. Think about it, Oren continued. When their soldiers engage in battle, they are no different from any other soldier in the galaxy. But when their civilians are thrust into combat, when they're pushed into situations where survival is at stake, they become something else entirely. They fight with the same ferocity, the same desperation. And that's what makes them unstoppable. He let the words sit in the room for a moment. There was no denying it. Earth's military strength came from its civilians, not because they were trained, but because they were raised to be survivors. Their way of life had forged them into fighters, into warriors, into a species that refused to bow to anyone. This changes everything, Zora murmured. We've been so focused on their military forces, but their true strength is in the people who aren't even soldiers. They are the warriors of Earth. And when the galaxy sees this, they'll have no choice but to recognize that humanity is not to be underestimated. Oren's eyes hardened as he leaned back in his chair. The galaxy has made a critical mistake. We thought we were dealing with a primitive species. But what we're facing is a civilization of warriors, every single one of them a potential threat. If they ever decided to unify, to marshal their civilians, they could challenge entire empires. Zora swallowed, the weight of that realization heavy on her shoulders. And we're just beginning to see what they're capable of. The Senate had made its decision. They had chosen to send Oren and his team to Earth to uncover the truth. But the truth was far more terrifying than they could have imagined. Earth wasn't just another species trying to make its way in the galaxy. Earth was a force, a living, breathing entity, shaped by its brutal environment into something far more dangerous than anyone had ever predicted. Oren stood up, his mind racing with possibilities. We need to prepare for what's coming. The galaxy is about to find out that Earth is a civilization like no other. The challenge had been set. Earth's rise as a galactic power was inevitable, and the Senate, for the first time, would have to reckon with the full extent of humanity's terrifying potential. The transmission came through in the dead of night, its contents so simple, so direct, that Commander Oren's hand froze over the control panel. The Galactic Senate had issued a directive, urgent, final, and unequivocal. We need Earth on our side, or they need to be eliminated. For a moment, Oren couldn't move. He had spent months investigating, unraveling the mystery of humanity's hidden strength, only to reach this conclusion. Earth was now too dangerous to ignore. And yet, despite everything he had uncovered, the Senate had made its decision. Earth's value, its potential, was undeniable. But so was its threat. They had underestimated the humans' civilian warriors. Now, they would face the consequences. The transmission continued, outlining the details of an upcoming diplomatic mission to Earth, led by Oren and his team. The goal: convince humanity to join the galactic defense system. The backup plan: if diplomacy failed, they would need to take more drastic measures. Oren's heart sank. Join us, or face the consequences. Oren hadn't expected the Senate's decision to be easy, but he hadn't expected this level of cold pragmatism either. He leaned back in his chair, the weight of the mission settling in. There was no going back now. If humanity refused, the galaxy's fragile peace would collapse into chaos. The next morning, Orin and his team arrived on Earth, cloaked in secrecy. They had no illusions about how humanity would view them. To the humans, the Senate's arrival would be an invitation to either ally with the galaxy's great powers or risk becoming their enemy. The question now was how Earth would respond. What the galaxy underestimated, Orin thought, was that humanity was not driven by fear, it was driven by pride. Orin had heard the rumors about human pride, about how they viewed themselves in relation to the galaxy. Humans had never bowed to any empire, never cowered before any conqueror. They had fought wars, survived disasters, and emerged victorious time and time again. Now they had to decide, would they align with the galaxy or stand alone? The human ambassador greeted them in the heart of Earth's capital, a vast, towering city that stood as a testament to humanity's resilience. Her name was Olivia Drake, a former soldier turned diplomat, and her gaze was steady as she addressed Orin. "I've read the reports," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I understand why you've come." Orin's pulse quickened. This was the moment of truth. If humanity rejected the Senate's overtures, the galaxy would be at war. "Ambassador Drake," he began, choosing his words carefully. "We've studied your people extensively. We know what you've been through, what you've endured. And now, we want you to join the Galactic Defense Initiative. Together, we can ensure that your world and your people are protected." Drake's lips curved into a tight smile, one that betrayed no emotion. "And what if we refuse?" Orin's breath caught in his throat. He had expected resistance, but the force of her words was something else entirely. "You're a formidable people," he said, choosing his words with precision. "Your civilians are unmatched in combat. If you ally with us, your strength will be amplified, and we'll stand together against any threat. But if you choose to stand alone—" Drake raised a hand, silencing him. "If we choose to stand alone, the galaxy will have to reckon with the consequences. You may think you understand us, but you don't." The implication was clear. The humans had fought battles no one else could even comprehend. They had survived things no empire in the galaxy had ever faced. They had built a society not just to survive, but to dominate when the time came. Orin could feel the weight of her words. The humans didn't need the galaxy. They had survived on their own for centuries. The question wasn't whether they could survive without the Senate. It was whether the Senate could survive without them. As Orin stepped back, preparing for the next phase of the negotiations, his mind raced. He had seen humanity's capabilities firsthand, but now, standing before a human who embodied everything he had learned about their species, he understood the magnitude of their power. The Senate had been right about one thing. Earth's civilians were their greatest weapon. But they had underestimated humanity's will to remain free, to stand on their own terms, without bending to the will of any galactic empire. It was no longer a question of diplomacy. It was a battle for respect. And in this battle, Earth would not back down. "Prepare yourselves, Orin." Drake's words echoed in his mind as he left the room. "Because what you're about to face won't be what you expect." Orin couldn't help but agree. What he had underestimated about Earth was no longer a mystery. They were not just a threat, they were a force to be reckoned with, one that would shape the future of the galaxy. And if the Senate wasn't careful, they might soon find themselves bowing to human power instead. The decision had been made. The Galactic Senate's plan to bring Earth into the fold of the Galactic Defense Initiative had failed. And with it, the galaxy's fragile peace shattered. Commander Orin stood at the center of the war room, watching the holographic projections of Earth's battlefields unfold across the table. The news from the front lines was devastating. Humanity had made its choice. They would stand alone, and now, the Senate was forced to face the consequences. As the screen flickered with updates, Orin's thoughts raced. He had known the humans were a threat, but this was something else entirely. Earth's civilians, emboldened by their independence and sheer force of will, had not only resisted the Senate's diplomatic efforts, but they had struck back with a ferocity that no one had anticipated. The full scale of humanity's power had only just begun to reveal itself. The human forces weren't like any the galaxy had encountered. There were no elite soldiers, no advanced technologies that could be easily countered. What they had was a simple truth. Earth fought with everything it had. Their civilians, raised in a world where survival was the only rule, fought with primal instinct. And the galaxy's most advanced forces had underestimated them. "We've underestimated them," Orin muttered, his voice barely audible. "This war will be unlike anything we've faced." The room was filled with tension as other high-ranking officials murmured their agreement. The Senate had underestimated Earth's ability to unite, their drive to protect their homeworld at any cost. Now, the galaxy's mightiest armies were struggling to keep up with the pace of Earth's relentless counterattacks. It was no longer a conventional war. Earth had found a new kind of warfare, something that could not be predicted or prepared for. Instead of relying on advanced technology or specialized tactics, humanity had turned the entire planet into a battlefield. Every civilian was a soldier. Every inch of territory was contested not with organized armies, but with a ceaseless, decentralized resistance. This was guerrilla warfare on a scale the galaxy had never seen. "Update," a voice broke through the silence. A hologram flickered, showing a battlefield on Earth's moon. A massive space station, once thought impregnable, was now in ruins. And standing among the wreckage were human soldiers, no special forces, no high-tech weaponry, just humans, using the very terrain of the moon as their advantage. Orin watched in disbelief as the data streamed in. Earth's forces had hijacked a station that had been meant to secure the moon, using a tactic never before seen in galactic warfare. It wasn't about technology. It wasn't about advanced weapons or superior numbers. It was about adaptability and an unrelenting desire to win. The room grew quiet as the reality set in. "They're not fighting a war, they're fighting for survival," Orin said, his voice steady but grim. "And we are not prepared for what's coming next." The Senate had miscalculated. They had assumed that Earth's willingness to join the defense initiative would stem from diplomacy, from promises of protection. What they didn't account for was that humanity had fought for its survival long before the Senate ever considered them a threat. Earth didn't need the Senate's protection. It had survived without them for centuries, and now it was making that survival known to the galaxy. As Orin turned back to the projections, his mind raced. The galaxy had been at peace for too long, but peace had made them complacent. They had forgotten what war truly was. And now they were facing a force that was not only willing to fight, but had the heart and resilience to win. It wasn't just about Earth's civilians anymore. It was about what they represented, a civilization that refused to be dominated no matter the cost. A species that had honed the art of war not in battlefields, but in everyday life. The war had only just begun, and Earth's victory seemed less like a possibility and more like an inevitability.